The morning sun stretched softly over the village of Mpik, warming the thatched rooftops and stirring life into every corner of the earth. Smoke from cooking fires curled lazily toward the sky. Somewhere near the square, the drummers had begun. Their palms struck hide in practiced rhythm, not too loud yet, just enough to say it has begun. The festival preparations were underway. Nia knelt beside a wooden mortar near her hut, her frame calm and still, though her hands moved rhythmically, grinding maize into a soft yellow powder. She wore a pale blue wrapper and a cream headscarf. Her arms were dusted with flour, and sweat from her brow glistened under the morning light. Her eyes, however, told a different story. They were quiet and far off, watching nothing and everything all at once. The thump of the pestle in her hand fell in a counterbeat to the drums. For a moment, it felt as if she were drumming her own tune, one heard only by herself. The weight of silence hung in the air, broken only by birds, footsteps and far-off laughter. Then came another sound, footsteps behind her, heavy, calculated. Mama Nyari stood at the doorway of the hut, arms folded, eyes narrow. The older woman's frame had thickened with years of hard living. Her brows were furrowed not by age, but by a permanent state of disapproval. Her lips were pressed into a thin line that had never welcomed Nia, not from the first day Bako brought her into this home. "You grind as if you have no bones," Mama Nyari muttered, loud enough to sting but not enough to call it shouting. "Even the maize is tired of you." Nia kept her eyes on the maize, pestle moving, unmoved. She'd learned that silence was not weakness, it was a kind of shield. She breathed slowly and pressed her lips together. Mama Nyari hissed, stepping closer as if to supervise. "Look at this mess. Who told you to grind outside? Flies will smell it before the food does." Still Nia said nothing. From the edge of the compound, Bako returned with a bundle of firewood on his shoulder. His gait was heavy, back bent slightly as if carrying more than wood. His eyes caught sight of his wife, then flicked quickly away. His pace slowed near Mama Nyari, who nodded slightly, acknowledging her son as if he were still 10 years old and obedient. Bako placed the firewood beside the kitchen and mumbled, "Morning." "To you," Mama Nyari replied curtly, then added, "Your wife's grinding maize like she's stirring water." Bako glanced at Nia but said nothing. Nia rose from her kneeling position to wipe her hands on her wrapper. As she straightened, her necklace slipped from beneath her blouse, a simple leather string with a carved wooden pendant. The carving, though worn now, was shaped like a sun with rays spreading outward. Her late father had made it for her before her wedding. She clutched it often when she needed strength. As she reached up to tuck it back under her blouse, the thin cord snapped. The pendant fell to the ground between the three of them, silent and small. For a second everything paused. Bako looked away. Nia bent quickly to pick it up, but Mama Nyari stepped forward deliberately and placed her bare foot on it. The sound that followed was neither loud nor sharp, but it was cruel. Wood cracking beneath heel. Nia froze mid-reach, staring at the foot, the broken gift. Her breath caught in her throat, her hand hovering just above the earth. No words were exchanged. Bako looked down, then turned and walked into the hut without a sound. Mama Nyari slowly stepped back, adjusting her shawl like nothing had happened. Her face unreadable, she murmured, "It was just wood." Nia picked up the remains of the pendant, splintered at one edge, and closed her fingers around it gently. Her hand trembled, but she didn't allow her face to change. She stood up slowly, dusted the flour off her wrapper, and carried the maize bowl toward the kitchen without a glance back. Her fingers curled tightly around the broken sun. The drums in the distance continued, steadier now, louder, as the village woke with celebration. Laughter drifted from the marketplace. Children ran barefoot along the paths. Somewhere meat was already roasting. But within Nia's compound, the only sound was the lingering echo of something that had once mattered being crushed under a foot. And still she said nothing. Only the drummers spoke. It had been almost 2 years since Nia first stepped foot into Mpik as a bride, her eyes full of hope and heart stitched together by promise. The sun that day had smiled generously as the village women ululated and clapped, welcoming her with wrappers tied high and hands covered in white chalk. Children skipped behind the marriage procession, and the scent of roasted yams floated through the air like a song of celebration. Bako's father, Baba Munin, had been the first to embrace her. His arms had been wide, strong with age and softened by joy. "You are home now, my daughter," he'd said, his voice warm like groundnut soup simmering over fire. "This house is brighter today." But Mama Nyari had stood a step behind him, her arms crossed, lips pressed in a disapproving line, her eyes scanning Nia from head to toe as if weighing her spirit against invisible expectations. She'd offered no embrace, just a muttered, We'll see what your hands are worth. Still, Nia had tried. She rose before dawn, swept the compound until her wrists ached, fetched water with the other women, laughed with the children, and helped anyone who asked. She carried the heart of a mother, even without children of her own. She remembered names quickly, learned to sing the village songs during millet pounding, and smiled easily, as though she believed the whole village could be her family. And for a time it almost was. Old Mzee Kalisa said, "This girl walks like sunlight." Auntie Sephu asked her to braid her daughter's hair. Even the children came running to her when they scraped their knees. But Mama Nyari watched from the shadows, lips growing tighter, words fewer. Her son Bako, once brash and loud, had begun to soften. He returned home on time. He helped Nia in the garden, and even once laughed out loud when she dropped cassava flour on his head. To Mama Nyari it was an offense. "She's making you soft," she hissed to Bako one morning while Nia was at the stream. Bako looked at her, unsure. "She's just kind." "She's making you her puppet," Mama Nyari snapped. "You used to be a man. Now you're running after her like a goat behind salt." The poison was slow but steady. Her words wrapped around Bako's pride like weeds around young maize. Soon he began to change. The laughter stopped. He came home silent, irritable. He grunted at Nia's greetings. Then came the shouting. Small things became reasons. Not enough salt in the stew, a misplaced calabash, a shirt not folded as he liked. His voice grew sharp, barking orders where once he'd spoken gently. Nia bore it quietly. Not because she was weak, but because she hoped. Hoped the man she married was still somewhere beneath the rising storm. One evening, just after sunset, Nia sat outside the hut, speaking softly with her younger sister who had come to visit from a nearby village. They laughed gently, speaking of their childhood, their late father's favorite riddles, and the dream Nia had of one day starting a weaving group for village women. Then her sister's tone turned serious. "You don't smile the same, Nia." "I'm fine," Nia replied, eyes low. "Are you sure?" Nia hesitated, then whispered, "Sometimes I wonder if I should return home. Just for a while. To remember myself." Unbeknownst to them, Mama Nyari was sitting behind the hut, skinning cassava. She heard every word. That night, as the moon rose behind the acacia trees, she stepped into Bako's hut. He was half asleep, shirtless, resting after a long day. She leaned close, her breath heavy with bitterness. "She mocks you," she said. "Even now, she's plotting to leave. You'll be the laughingstock. Everyone already says she's stronger than you. You better remind her who the man in this house is." Bako said nothing at first, but her words sank deep. Later that night, as Nia poured water into a clay pot, she didn't hear him come in behind her. His hand gripped her wrist suddenly. "What were you telling your sister?" She blinked. "Just stories. Nothing." "Lies," he spat. "You think you're better than me?" Then it came, the first slap. Quick, brutal. Like lightning out of clear sky. Her head jerked to the side. The water pot crashed to the ground. Her cheek burned and her ears rang. But she didn't fall. She stood there still. Swallowed hard. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Her hand slowly touched the place where his hand had struck. Then she looked up, not at him but past him. To no one. To everything. And in the quietest voice, she whispered to herself, "My body will not speak, but my silence will." The first bruise was small, round, deep purple, just above Nia's elbow. She kept it hidden beneath her wrapper, wrapping the fabric tightly when she fetched water or joined the women at the grinding stone. But in a village like Mpik, silence was never truly silent. Words moved through leaves, between children's games, across cooking fires. By the third market day, whispers had begun. "She doesn't laugh anymore. I saw her wince when lifting the calabash. That mark on her arm, no way she fell, not the way she walks." Elder women with knowing eyes watched her with tight-lipped concern. Auntie Yuyo, who had once praised Nia's cooking, now only nodded grimly when they crossed paths. The whispering grew not with outrage but with habit. A sad kind of resignation hung between the words, like smoke that never fully cleared. No one intervened. The same women who whispered folded clothes next to her at the riverbank. They saw, they pitied, but they did not act. In Mpik, men were the heads of houses, and what happened behind closed doors belonged to the shadows, not the sun. Bako grew colder. His eyes, once unsure, were now defensive, like a dog that bites because it fears losing its ground. He came home late, barked short commands, and eyed Nia with suspicion even when she was still. The bruises deepened, sometimes on her thigh, sometimes her back, never on her face. That was Mama Nyari's instruction. "Beat her where it doesn't show," she whispered one evening as Bako washed his hands. Let the world keep calling her graceful. Let her bleed under her skin. That's how you break one who thinks she can't be broken. And so Bako obeyed. But Nia did not break. She folded laundry, stirred pots, and swept the compound in silence. She did not protest. She did not shout back. She did not run. And somehow her silence enraged Bako even more. He struck to get a reaction, but got none. He wanted screams, but was met with stillness. One day, as the ache in her ribs made it hard to lift the pestle, Nia slipped away into the forest trail beyond the maize fields. The path was narrow, veiled in shade, known only to a few. She walked past the mango trees, past the thorny acacia, and stopped before a small hut covered in creeping vines and faded prayer beads. A carved wooden gourd hung from the doorway, turning slowly in the wind. This was the home of Shosho Deka, the old healer woman, part midwife, part mystic, and all mystery. People said she'd once spoken to spirits, that she knew the secrets of roots and hearts. Children feared her and women respected her. She never came to gatherings. She never asked for anything. But when someone was in need, they found her. Nia knocked softly once. The door creaked open before she could knock again. Shosho Deka was there, sitting on a stool, grinding something in a small stone bowl. Her hair was white and woven into thick ropes, her skin wrinkled like old bark. She looked up with eyes that seemed to have lived 3 lifetimes. Come. Nia entered slowly, holding her side with one hand. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Shosho didn't ask who hit her or why. She didn't comment on the limp or the hollow in Nia's eyes. She just reached behind her, pulled out a small gourd and poured a thick brown paste into a clay bowl. Then she handed her a cloth and pointed to the mat. Lie down. Face the wall. Nia obeyed. She felt the old woman's hands gently lift her wrapper and begin applying the cold paste. The touch was soft but purposeful, firm in a way that made Nia want to cry, not from pain but from the realization that someone, even silently, still cared. They stayed in silence for a long time. The wind rustled the banana leaves outside. A bird called twice and flew off. Somewhere distant, a drumbeat from another village thudded like a forgotten heartbeat. Then Nia asked, her voice barely above a breath, "Why do women suffer in silence?" Shosho didn't answer right away. She tied the cloth over Nia's ribs, then helped her sit up. Then she looked at her, eyes steady, and said, "Because some silences wait for the perfect sound to return." Nia frowned slightly. "I don't understand." "You will," Shosho said. "One day the world will hear you not through your cries, but through what rises after them." Nia looked down at her hands. They were calloused, strong but tired. She nodded slowly. Each week after that she returned, always quietly, always at dusk. Shosho gave her herbs to swallow and paste to rub, and occasionally a story to carry. A story about a tree that refused to fall even when struck by lightning. Or about a woman who once swallowed the stars so her daughters could walk in light. These stories stayed with Nia. And slowly something inside her began to shift, not loudly, not all at once, but like dry earth beginning to soften under steady rain. She still said little. Still obeyed. Still cooked and cleaned. But now, when she touched her bruises, she no longer winced in shame. She listened for the sound that would return. The sun rose high and golden over the village of Mpik as the smell of roasted yam and groundnut stew drifted through the air, mingling with laughter and the low hum of excitement. Today was the annual harvest festival, the most sacred and joyous gathering of the year. Women wrapped in vibrant fabrics moved between huts, carrying pots and baskets filled with food. Children decorated the trees with paper streamers and dried maize husks. The men had begun rehearsing their dances in the square, and the village drummers warmed their hands over fire, stretching their skins in anticipation. This was not just a celebration of crops, it was a celebration of life, of survival, of fertility. Every year, one woman from each quadrant of the village was chosen to receive a blessing from the elders, meant to bring abundance to the land, the womb, and the home. This year, to everyone's murmured surprise, the name drawn to represent the southern end was Nia. She had been quiet for many moons, but her hands had worked tirelessly in the fields. Her song, though soft, was never out of tune. The elders said she still walked with dignity. That was enough. But for Mama Nyari it was an outrage. "She is cursed," she shouted to Bako when the announcement came. "A barren woman with a snake's tongue. That's who they want to bless? Let them bless dust." She stormed through the compound, muttering darkly, and before nightfall she had visited 2 of the elder women, planting seeds of doubt. "You will see. She is not fit. She's a disgrace. Let another woman stand in her place." But the elders, though polite, had heard the whispers too. They had watched Nia. They'd seen her swollen limbs and the way her voice calmed crying children. One of them even said quietly, "Sometimes the woman who bleeds unseen is the one who deserves the loudest blessing." When the day arrived, Nia stood in her hut, brushing flower petals into her braids. Her wrapper was white, clean as morning milk, and her blouse was embroidered with small suns, an old design from her late father's village. Around her neck hung a new string, though the broken pendant had been tucked inside her sash. She stared at herself in the small cracked mirror, lips steady. She had not smiled in days. But today her eyes did not look away from themselves. Outside, Bako was already drinking. His friends had brought calabashes full of fermented palm wine, and he downed most of one before noon. He leaned on a wooden post, shirt half-buttoned, eyes glazed. Mama Nyari hovered behind him like smoke, fanning his anger with every word. "She'll shame you standing up there like a queen. Everyone will think she rules your house. Is that what you want? Let them see you control her. Do it now. In front of them." Bako grunted, barely listening. But the wine made her words thicker, and they settled on him like mud. The drums began to roll in the square. The festival had started. Women lined up on one side of the clearing, wrapped in bright colors, faces painted with white chalk. Men stood opposite them, bare-chested and gleaming with oil, preparing for the fertility dance. In the center, the elders sat beneath a shaded canopy, eyes alert, expressions solemn. Then Nia stepped forward. The crowd grew hushed. She walked with measured grace, each step deliberate. Her white stood out like a dove among fire. The flowers in her hair were yellow, fresh. Children craned their necks to see. Some women gasped softly. Mama Nyari clenched her jaw. Bako, already swaying, pushed through the crowd and stumbled toward her. His face was a mess of confusion, rage, and something sadder. He stood before Nia, his chest heaving. She did not flinch. "Think you're better than me?" he slurred. The drums were just beginning to rise, pulsing with life, preparing for the first wave of dance. Then, without warning, Bako raised his hand and slapped Nia hard, across the face. The sound cracked through the air like a branch snapping in a dry forest. The drums stopped. Silence rushed in so quickly it rang in everyone's ears. The birds went still. The wind paused. Nia did not fall. She stood, her face turned, her cheek already red. Mama Nyari smiled faintly, arms folded. Nia slowly turned back to face the crowd. Her eyes met no one and yet everyone. Her flowers were slightly disheveled, but her spine had not bent. The elders looked at each other, unsure. A child in the front began to cry. Then another. The drummers still sat frozen, their hands mid-air. No one moved. The slap had not landed on just one woman. It had struck the festival, the meaning, the rhythm, the unspoken promise that sacred days were sacred for all. And there, in the heart of the silence, stood Nia, unmoving, unspeaking, but somehow louder than every drum that had ever been played. The silence after the slap stretched like cloth hung to dry, heavy and unmoving. Every eye remained locked on Nia, expecting her to shout, to cry, to run, to crumble. But she did none of those things. She stood still for a breath longer, her cheeks swelling with slow heat, her eyes unfocused for only a second. Then, without a word, she bent down and picked something from the earth, her necklace now half buried in the red dust. The same necklace her father had carved when she was still a girl who believed in stories that ended with love and firelight. The crowd parted as Nia began to walk, not away but forward, toward the center of the square, where the drums had once spoken and now lay mute. She walked with a poise that betrayed no pain, no hesitation. Only purpose. No one dared stop her. When she reached the open space, she turned and faced the village. Her voice had not yet risen. Her hands trembled slightly, but she gripped the broken necklace tightly in one fist and the edge of her wrapper in the other. Then, slowly, deliberately, she began to untie the knot at her waist. A murmur rose through the crowd. Bako blinked in confusion. Mama Nyari's mouth dropped open. She let the wrapper fall. Beneath it, Nia wore a simple underskirt and blouse, but what stunned the village was not what she wore, it was what was revealed. Bruises. On her arms. Her ribs. Her thigh. Purple, blue and yellow, layered like bruises on top of older bruises. One just beneath her shoulder looked fresh, swollen and angry. Another curved behind her elbow like the shadow of a twisted hand. A sound rippled through the crowd, not words but gasps, low wails, a choking silence. One of the women dropped her bowl. A young girl covered her mouth. An elder woman's eyes filled instantly, her hand going to her chest. Then, in a voice quiet but clear, Nia spoke. I was told to bleed where you cannot see. But now you will. No one moved. She lifted the broken necklace in her palm. My father gave this to me the day I became a wife. He said love is patient, like the sun waiting for the moon. He didn't tell me that love can be broken, just like this. She paused, her voice steady. I was raised to speak gently, to respect, to submit. I was told that silence is strength, that endurance is noble, that pain makes you a woman. And so I stayed quiet. Nia scanned the crowd. Her eyes stopped on no one, but they saw everything. I cooked. I cleaned. I gave without asking. I swallowed shame with every meal. And when the first blow came, I told myself it would be the last. But it wasn't. It never is. Because silence teaches the hand to strike again. Bako took a shaky step forward as if to speak. But Nia's hand rose slightly. And he stopped. I want you all to look, she continued. Not to pity me, but to understand that I walk among you every day. And so do others like me. We sweep your compounds. We fetch your water. We sing at your weddings. And we bleed behind your doors. An older woman near the front clutched her chest and whispered something to the woman beside her. Another, younger, wiped her eyes and turned away, ashamed. Nia's voice did not rise, but it filled the square like a slow tide. He hit me because I spoke kindly. He hit me because I didn't fight back. He hit me because his mother told him a woman must be tamed. And you all saw the bruises. You whispered. But none of you spoke. One little girl near the front began to cry softly. She turned and buried her face in her mother's skirt. Still Nia stood strong. I'm not the only one. Look beside you. Look behind you. Some of the women you honor every day walk with broken ribs and smiling mouths. Then slowly a figure emerged from the crowd. Dressed in dark green with a long staff and a necklace of shells. It was Shosho Deka. She moved with calm but carried the air of a storm. Her feet barely made a sound as she crossed the square and stood beside Nia. She looked over the crowd like a mother hawk. This girl, Shosho said, her voice raw but firm, carries the truth of 10 lifetimes. She turned to Nia and touched her shoulder gently. And the silence she has broken today will feed more than soil. It will feed the future. Women began to murmur. Not with fear but with courage cracking through their chests. Tears fell without shame. Wives reached for each other's hands. Some nodded. Some wept. Some simply stared. Nia looked once more around the circle, at faces that had once been indifferent, some hostile, some now blooming with guilt, others blooming with something new, respect. Then she knelt, picked up her wrapper, folded it and tied it once again. She gave one final look, not to Bako, not to Mama Nyari, not to the elders, but to the drummers who still sat frozen. She did not wait for their rhythm. She created her own. And then without a word more she walked off the stage. Past the elders. Past the men. Past her husband, who stood slack-jawed, and his mother, who no longer had anything to say. Her back straight. Her steps even. Alone. But more dignified than anyone in that crowd. The drums did not play. Because in that moment even they knew. No sound could match what had just been spoken. The sky turned dark quickly after the festival ended, as if the heavens themselves were too ashamed to linger over Mpik that night. No dancing. No firelight laughter. No celebration. Only the scent of spilled palm wine, wilted flowers, and something heavier. Truth finally aired, like long-closed windows suddenly thrown open in a storm. Word of what happened at the square traveled faster than any drumbeat. By moonrise, elders gathered beneath the great baobab near the council grounds. The carved stools were placed in a circle. Mats rolled out. A small fire was lit, not for warmth but for clarity. This was no ordinary meeting. This was an emergency. And for the first time in many years, the council invited not just the elder men, but the village's elder women to sit equally among them. That alone was a sign. The ground was shifting. Mama Nyari arrived late, with her headscarf knotted tighter than usual and her lips pulled inward. She did not greet anyone. She sat on the far edge of the circle, arms crossed like a wall. Shosho Deka stood beside Nia in the center, her staff planted firmly in the ground. Nia wore a clean wrapper, her hair tied back, her face free of shame. She did not speak first. She had already spoken when it mattered most. Elder Yusufu cleared his throat, looking around. Tonight we do not speak in riddles. We speak in truth. Something happened today that dishonored this village, not just the girl who was struck, but the spirit of who we say we are. The murmurs began, low and shifting. Mama Nyari rose sharply. Dishonor? That girl is a snake in the grass. She's bewitched my son. He was strong before her. She walks like a queen but carries poison in her silence. Ask the spirits, they will tell you. Shosho Deka raised her hand slowly. The spirits have seen enough, she said. Another woman stood up. A quiet one. And a yuyo. I saw her arm last month. Purple as plum skin. I didn't speak. I regret that now. Another followed. Then another. One by one women stood and spoke, not just of Nia but of themselves. I, too, was once beaten by a husband who smiled at the chief but cursed at me. My mother told me to stay quiet. That the bruises would make me stronger. They didn't. They only made me silent. I remember a day I bled and still cooked for the man who made me bleed. The fire crackled louder as the circle thickened with painful honesty. The men listened. Some dropped their heads. Others clenched their jaws. But none interrupted. Mama Nyari's eyes darted between them all. So now every woman wants to cry at once? What next? Shall we burn the whole village for one girl's hurt pride? She carries more than pride, an elder woman snapped. She carries what we've all buried. Then it was Bako's turn. He was brought forward by two men, one on each side. Not bound but heavy in steps, drunk no longer, just hollow. His eyes were swollen, not from drink this time but from what he could not undo. He stood before the council, wobbling slightly. Speak, said Elder Yusufu. Bako swallowed hard. I don't know what I am anymore. I used to laugh with her. I used to be proud to bring her water. Then I heard my mother's voice in my head more than my own. I thought I had to be feared to be respected. He looked at Nia, who met his gaze without blinking. I hit her, he confessed. Not once. Many times. And every time she said nothing. I thought that meant I was strong. But today she showed the whole village how weak I really am. No one clapped. No one cried. Only silence held his words. A long pause followed until Elder Chiku, one of the oldest women present, stood and said, The old ways taught us to endure, not to thrive. We honored the man more than the marriage. Today that ends. She turned to Nia. You are no longer under that roof. From this day you will live free. This village will see to it. You are not his wife in pain, you are your own woman in dignity. Bako's shoulders slumped. Elder Yusufu added, And you, Bako, must publicly apologize at sunrise tomorrow. If not, you will leave this village in shame. The choice is yours. Mama Nyari rose again. What of me? I am still the head woman of the Southern Council. I have duties. Elder Chiku looked at her sharply. You had power. And you used it to harm. From this moment forward, your name will no longer be called in council. You may keep your house, but your voice here is done. A silence followed, deeper than before. Then someone said, The drummers? It was tradition for the drummers to play when judgments were finalized, to mark a turning, a closure. The chief drummer stood, arms crossed. We do not play for curses and cloth, he said, eyes fixed on Mama Nyari. From this day the drums will never rise for her again. Gasps rippled through the circle. That punishment was as harsh as exile for someone of Mama Nyari's stature. But no one objected. The council meeting ended under the stars, without celebration, without feasting. But something had changed in the soil of Mpik. As Nia stepped away from the firelight, Shosho Deka walked beside her. Are you afraid? She asked gently. Nia shook her head. No. I have already walked through the storm. Now I am just learning to plant again. And as she walked back to her new life, stripped of marriage but full of her name, she knew that the village had heard not only her voice, but its own conscience for the first time in a very long time. The hut was small, just 2 rooms with mud walls and a thatched roof, but it faced the sunrise, and for Nia that was enough. It sat just down the slope from Shosho Deka's place, close enough to hear the old woman's evening prayers and morning brooms sweeping. The land was quiet, kissed by soft breezes and unclaimed by gossip. Here, Nia did not carry the title of wife or victim. She simply existed as herself, a woman replanting the field of her own name. Her first mornings in the hut were spent gathering firewood, water, bits of fabric left behind in the village center. It wasn't long before the younger girls began following her. First out of curiosity, then admiration, then purpose. It started with 3 of them, Kina, Abibi and little Munira, each balancing chores on their heads but slowing when they saw Nia's fingers working thread into patterns. What are you making? Kina asked one morning. A future, Nia replied, smiling. Would you like to help me stitch it? That's how her weaving lessons began. Under a mango tree, Nia spread a mat and each day the circle grew. Some came to learn to weave. Others came to sit quietly, to listen, to breathe. Soon, Nia began adding stories, not just tales of clever hares or greedy hyenas, but stories about women who didn't kneel to pain, stories where tears became seeds and silence became soil. The girls listened wide-eyed. And then, slowly they began to share their own. It was Shosho Deka who gave the circle its name. "These are not just stories," she said one evening, pressing her cane into the earth. "These are poems stitched from the torn places. Let it be a women's story circle." And so it was. Every week they gathered, girls and women, sitting in the round, pouring pain into poetry, stitching wounds into rhythms, weaving strength into memory. One cloudy afternoon, a girl named Mariamu appeared at the edge of the circle. Her lip was swollen. One eye red. She didn't speak. Her mother stood behind her, head bowed, trembling. I didn't know where else to go," the mother whispered. Nia walked toward her, knelt to Mariamu's level and held her hand. "You've come to the right place," she said. Nia took the girl into her hut, cleaned her wounds and gave her a soft cloth to sleep on. That night, Nia didn't sleep. Her mind burned, not just with anger but with urgency. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, she went to the girl's home. The man, her stepfather, opened the door with a sneer. "You again? Mind your own house." Nia didn't flinch. "This is my house now. Wherever a child cries and no one listens, that is my house." He raised his hand, but before it could move, 3 men appeared behind Nia. One of them was the same man who used to laugh when Bako pushed her at the well. "We've seen enough women walk away in silence," he said. "Try raising that hand again, and it will not rise a second time." The man stumbled back, stunned. Nia didn't speak again. She didn't have to. Her presence had become louder than any shout. From that day forward, something strange happened in Peak. Men began to lower their voices when they argued with their wives in public. Children whispered Nia's name as a kind of spell for safety. And the women? They began to walk taller. Not because the world was suddenly fair, but because they had seen one of their own rebuild from ash without becoming bitter. One early morning, a group of school children gathered outside Nia's hut. They giggled and shuffled until she opened her door, blinking from sleep. "Story. Story," they chorused. She laughed, a full, open laugh that hadn't been heard in months. All right, she said, sitting on her steps. "Let me tell you the story of the girl who turned bruises into bridges." They sat cross-legged in the dust, eyes wide, ears open, hearts quietly learning that courage had a sound. It sounded like healing. It sounded like Nia. That afternoon, Nia planted sunflower seeds in front of her hut. She knelt beside them, pressing each seed into the soil like a small prayer. One of the girls asked, "Why sunflowers?" Nia smiled. "Because they follow the light. Even when the sky turns gray, they keep looking for the sun." Every day after that, the girls watered them with their leftover drinking water. The seeds sprouted, then bloomed, their golden faces turned upward, stubborn and radiant. They became the symbol of the women's story circle. Even when strangers passed by, they asked, "Who lives there?" And the villagers would say, "That's Nia's place. The house with the courage that grows." But Nia never called herself a leader. She didn't need to. Her presence led. Her stillness taught. Her words, rare, gentle but true, shaped a new rhythm in the village. One evening, as she stood looking out at the small group of girls now threading patterns in unison, Shosho Deka appeared behind her. "They used to fear silence," she said. "Now they gather to listen to it." Nia nodded. "It's because we turn the silence into song." Shosho Deka touched her shoulder. "You've replanted yourself, child. And what you're growing," she paused, watching a girl laugh while braiding another's hair, "is louder than any drum." Nia didn't reply. She simply bent down and plucked a wildflower, pressing it between the pages of her journal. Later that night she wrote, "My body was not made to be a battlefield. It was made to be a field, where new things can grow again and again." The sunflowers swayed in the wind outside her door. And the village, once deaf to bruises, now listened even to petals falling. Because of her. The dry season had thinned the roads and browned the grasses. Dust settled over the rooftops of Mpik like forgotten sorrow. And into that weary path, barefoot and gaunt, came Bako. His shirt hung loose from his shoulders. His face, once proud and rigid, now looked hollow. The village dogs didn't bark. The children didn't run to greet him. The men at the well turned their backs. His name had become a door most refused to open. He had returned not with thunder but with quiet shame. 4 days he wandered, avoiding the gathering places, drinking from his cupped hands at the stream, sleeping under abandoned grain stores. He watched the women pass with baskets and babies, none acknowledging him. Even the gossip he had once sparked now ignored him like old wind. But on the fourth day, as the sun pressed low against the ridge, he saw her. Nia. She sat under the wide branches of the baobab tree, surrounded by girls weaving patterns and telling stories. Her laugh rose like honey, unhurried, unbothered. A young girl nestled into her lap. Nia braided the child's hair while speaking softly. Bako stopped. He hadn't expected this. He thought she would look broken. Or at least bitter. But she looked free-rooted. And that made his knees give way. He stepped forward, trembling. The children noticed first and went quiet. Then Nia looked up. Calm. Alert. But not shaken. He knelt on the red earth, his head bowed. I've come, his voice cracked, to ask you to forgive me. Silence rippled through the circle. Even the birds in the baobab seemed to pause. Nia stood. She gently placed the child beside her, brushing dust from her wrapper. Then walked to where Bako knelt. She did not raise him. She did not curse him. She simply said, I don't carry what you left. Bako looked up, confused. I only carry what I've planted, she continued. She gestured around her, the circle of girls, the cloths spread out in patterns, the growing baobab shadow reaching further than it ever had before. He reached into his shirt pocket, pulled out something. It was her necklace, the one that had broken on the day of the festival. Repaired. Clumsily. But intact. I kept it, he said. I fixed it. I thought maybe. She took it not out of sentiment but out of closure. She turned it over in her palm. Then tucked it into her cloth pouch. Not on her neck. Not on her heart. He waited. For tears. For mercy. For anything. But she only nodded once. You may go now. He stood slowly, the dust clinging to his knees. He looked back once, but she had already returned to the circle. Laughing again. Teaching again. As if he had never come. As Bako walked toward the far edge of the village, he heard something in the distance. Drums. They started soft. Then layered. Then grew. He turned, a desperate hope flickering. Were they for him? But as he neared the village square, he saw the truth. The drums were for a girl named Temb, a 14-year-old celebrating her coming-of-age ceremony. Women danced in white. Men clapped. Children sang. It was a new story being born. And Bako was not part of it. The drummers, the same ones who had gone silent when he struck Nia, now beat with pride for a new generation of girls who would not kneel to silence. He stood at the edge of the celebration, invisible. He tried to step closer, but one of the drummers looked directly at him and shook his head slowly. Not for you. Not anymore. Bako turned back toward the hills, the necklace still swinging in his pocket. No one followed. No one called his name. Behind him, the drums rose louder. Not in anger, but in joy. For a girl becoming a woman. For a village learning a new rhythm. And for a woman under the baobab tree, who had planted more than forgiveness. She had planted a future that no hand could ever break again. The sun rose over Mpik with golden quiet, soft as a song not yet sung. Smoke curled from the cooking huts, children giggled while running between yards, and the air held a kind of knowing, like the village had exhaled something old and was now breathing in something new. The festival had returned. But this year it was not just to bless the harvest. It was to honor a woman who had turned silence into a language of strength. At the center of the square, a long wooden bench had been draped in white cloth. Upon it sat Nia. No longer just a wife. No longer someone's shadow. She was the guest of honor. She wore a pale golden wrapper with white embroidery. Her braided hair was adorned with sunflower petals, and her repaired necklace glinted gently at her collarbone. Around her were the girls, dressed in white, arms painted with soft tribal patterns, eyes shining with purpose. As they danced, they chanted her name, not loud, not wild, but steady, like heartbeat. And I. They spun in perfect rhythm, weaving in and out, their feet striking the earth like a song older than memory. The rhythm of the drum followed their movement, not leading it. Today the girls told the story. And the drum obeyed. From the shade of a tree, Shosho Deka watched. Her eyes wet but smiling. She leaned over and whispered to Nia, "They remember because you made them listen. That is harder than any war." Nia smiled. A quiet, long smile. She did not wave. She did not cry. She simply watched, holding the moment like a mother holds her newborn, delicately but with wonder. Behind the crowd, alone and unnoticed, sat Mama Nyari. The lines in her face had deepened. The shawl around her shoulders looked heavier than before. Her eyes did not rise to meet anyone's. She sat still, watching a celebration that did not invite her name. The children who once bowed at her feet now skipped past her without pause. She was not hated, but she was no longer followed. When the girls finished their dance, the drummers lifted their sticks in unison. One, an older boy, stepped forward. He looked to Nia. She gave a nod. And the solo began. It was unlike any solo Mpik had ever heard at a festival. There was no fury in it, no domination. It didn't climb fast or beat the air with pride. It began like water dripping into dry soil. A low pulse, a steady hum, like a mother's lullaby before the storm. Then a lift, a spiral of rhythm that wrapped itself not around the ears, but around the heart. The villagers listened. They did not cheer. They did not clap. They bowed their heads. Even the drummers, one by one, laid their sticks across their knees and bowed. Not in shame, but in reverence. The silence that followed was not empty. It was sacred. In that silence, babies stirred but didn't cry. The wind moved through the trees but made no sound. And for a full breath of time, the village of Mpik stood in quiet remembrance of a voice that had once trembled but never broke. Nia stood. She walked forward, barefoot, until she reached the center of the square. Her necklace caught the sun. Her hands were calm. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She turned slowly toward the drums. Then toward the girls. Then toward the tree where Shosho Deka watched. And finally toward Mama Nyari, who did not lift her eyes, but whose tears now darkened her lap. Nia bent and touched the earth, pressing her fingers into it gently. She whispered, just loud enough for the wind to carry. We are not only made by what wounds us, but by what we do after. The drummers picked up their sticks again but did not play. They waited, because something new had begun. And even drums must sometimes pause to listen. There are silences that suffocate, and those that save. She was told to kneel, but she rose like dawn. Not with fists, not with fire, but with the wound she did not hide. And when the drums dared to echo her name, even the elders stood still. For truth had found rhythm. In a woman's voice that once bled unseen.